Big news is shaking up the sewing world. The big four commercial pattern making companies, Butterick, McCall's, Simplicity, and Vogue, just filed for bankruptcy. For decades, these companies have been the go to for home sewers. So, what does this mean for us now? Honestly, I think it's the perfect time to take charge of your sewing and learn to draft your own patterns. That's what I did several years ago, and I have not looked back. I make all my own patterns right now. So this news is upsetting because I really do remember when I was in high school looking through these patterns, but I am not worried about my future sewing because I know how to draft all my own patterns. So let's go over what happened from a very, very high level. Earlier in the year, IG Design Group had sold to a liquidator for just $1. Wow. And then on July 3rd, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now they're going through restructuring and liquidation, and their future is really uncertain. We don't know if they are going to survive or if all four of these companies will just disappear. We just don't know the future. So this really puts home sewers in a very difficult situation. For decades, home sewers would go into Joann's or Hobby Lobby and flick through the pattern books. I just loved to do that in high school. It was just so inspiring and fun. And then you'd go find your pattern in the file cabinet and pick your number, and you would have that ready just to go home and start your project. It was such a fun experience, and this is going to potentially lead to higher prices, limited availability of patterns in the future, or all of these companies could just go away altogether. We just don't know. And also, since Joann's, their biggest retailer, filed for bankruptcy earlier in the year also and closed most, if not all, of their stores, this makes the whole supply chain of commercial patterns very shaky. So if you rely on commercial patterns for your sewing, this could make it very difficult moving forward. But in my opinion, the silver lining of this whole situation is it's the perfect time to learn to draft your own patterns. There are so many benefits to doing this in that you get the perfect fit every time when you draft your own patterns. You create a sloper based off of your measurements, and then every pattern that you make off of that sloper fits you perfectly. So you do not have to rely on the standard measurements that commercial pattern companies use. And none of us have standard measurements. We're all very specific. I'm extremely tall, so I can never find things that are long enough on the sleeves or at the hem. Some of us might be long-waisted or short-waisted, or we have like a larger bust or larger back end. So we all are very specific, and standard measurements, I don't think, fit anyone. And with making your own patterns, you have unlimited design freedom. You don't have to search out for a particular pattern of a garment that you are interested in. I cannot think of how many times I have seen on the sewing boards someone asking, hey, I'm looking for this design. Does anyone know a pattern that is similar to that? And people give lots of options, and they're never exactly the same. So you're going to have to make some modifications. So when I find a design online or from my head that I want to make, I just go to my drafting table and I just draft it up, and I can create it exactly the way I want. Based on my design ideas, not based on the other person's design ideas. And it's generally more cost effective and sustainable. So instead of buying a new pattern every time you want to make a new garment, I just have my sloper, and I just need a bit of paper, and I can draft a new pattern. So it's like, it costs a lot less for my piece of paper than it does when to go in and buy a whole new pattern every time. and the skill growth is so much fun. I was at first a bit intimidated to learn pattern making because it does seem challenging when you watch someone doing it. But once you get involved in it, it's really not as hard as it sounds. So don't let anyone let you think that it's super hard, because really not. It's just following some basic steps. And I am so happy now that I have developed those skills. I had wanted to learn pattern making for decades and I just put it off. And then many years ago, I finally decided one weekend to do it, and I did. And I am so happy that I did. And I love the independence of drafting my own patterns. Anytime I want a new design, I just go to my drafting table and can draft it up really quickly. I don't have to go to the store. I don't have to look for the design, which pattern making company is making that design. I don't have to wait for sales. So the independence that I have is wonderful. And now we're in this situation with potentially them going bankrupt. So that's quite nerve wracking if you're relying on them to provide all your future patterns. So independence of creating all your own is just really wonderful. Now, if you're ready to start giving pattern making a try, I've created something just for you. It's a free downloadable guide of how to create your first skirt sloper. So if you're interested in getting started with a skirt sloper, the link is in the description below. This free guide walks you through the tools you'll need, the measurements to take, and the exact steps to draft the first sloper. Best part, once it fits, the sloper can be transformed into an A-line, pencil, pleated, or flared skirt. It's the foundation for an entire wardrobe. You can grab it for free through the link in the description below. Now, just because the big four pattern makers may be disappearing, it doesn't mean that patterns in total are all disappearing. We still have the independent pattern making companies, and in many ways, we have been leaning more towards them, and they are thriving. Some of the benefits of buying patterns from independent pattern makers is that they often have more modern and trendy, fashionable designs. They're instantly available through a PDF download, so you don't have to run to the store. Their instructions are often much easier to understand than the big commercial four, which the instructions sometimes were just mind-numbingly difficult to understand. And you are buying from a small business, which is really fabulous to support small businesses. But there are also some downsides of buying from independent pattern making. Downloading a PDF is impossible if you don't have a printer. It can also be very challenging to tape together all of those PDF pieces. So that can be frustrating at some times. Sometimes the prices of these independent pattern makers are higher than we used to be able to get through stores like Joann's, that you could get really big discounts on the patterns. And you still have the problem of relying on just the patterns that they choose to make. And often their selection is much less than the commercial pattern making companies that had decades and decades of patterns we could buy in the past. So there was a really big selection there. So if you want to get started drafting your own patterns, the first step is to create your first sloper. So I have the skirt sloper, link is in the description below. Also, you would need to create a bodice sloper as well. So people often get nervous creating a sloper, but you do not need a lot of supplies. You just need a long ruler, big piece of paper, a pencil, and your measurements. If you have a French curve, just something so you can make, necklines and armholes, that's great, but not mandatory. And they're not expensive either. So you do not need a lot of tools. And then you just need to get a good resource to follow the steps. When it comes to your measurements, I would recommend that you pick a method that has more measurements versus less, because the more measurements that you take on yourself, the better the fit is going to be. So that would be one caveat. but it's really quite easy to draft your first sloper. While it may seem a bit daunting at the beginning, it's just following steps. And so I really would encourage you to give it a try. And if you want to get more details of what actually is a sloper and why it matters, check out my video here, What the Heck is a Sloper? And it'll give you much more information on that. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.